taking you through at the beginning of this a piece of it's not really marketing, it's explanation, it's technical explanation of what it is about IBM I that makes us a valuable platform to be on for our clients. We've had various versions of this throughout history called Why I or Why IBM I. I've gathered these things together because I think it's important that all of you who are listening, and especially as we get into, okay, what are we going to be doing with AI when I get to that part of the presentation, why would you want to be thinking about doing AI with IBM I? Well, it's because in part of the value proposition that IBM I has that is unique because of how IBM I is different than other platforms that we compete against. So let's go into this, why IBM I? Let's remember, those of us who are old enough to remember, let's remember that way back before AS400 was introduced, we were commissioned with solving business problems for customers by creating a system such that an application that ran on that system would gain benefits because it was running on the system that it couldn't get elsewhere. Every application is going to need to manage its data. Every application is going to need to manage its security. Every application is going to have to bring pieces together because all applications are built using other pieces of software. All applications are going to succeed only if they, as applications, can grow and change as customers grow and as technology changes. Okay, and every application vendor is going to want to write their stuff one time and not have to rewrite it again. Now, for those of you who are younger in the marketplace, this sort of platform did not exist back then. And when AS400 was architected to solve these problems, we were the first and only platform that had architectural value behind each of these things. So for example, we have this architecture of having a single level store platform. I'm going to talk in more detail about that later. That's why I'm going to gloss over it here. And it is directly architected with our fully relational database, DB2-4i. Okay, so those two things work together. Again, back in those days, every application had to manage and tell their users how to manage the storage for their applications on other platforms. On IBM I, they could turn it all over to the operating system, and we would manage the data, we would manage the storage, we would manage how the data was laid out in storage. Now, sure, you could, if you were an application vendor who really cared about one specific thing, you could probably get and do some things, but for the most part, we hid that stuff. We did that in an integrated way. So that's going to provide some value, and I'll show you that in a couple of charts. Okay. We had from the very beginning an object-based architecture because we wanted to make sure that every application could be built knowing that we would protect their software, the software that they did, plus the data that they had, in ways so that we could say only the operating system could change the contents of objects at the lowest level. All users and applications had to come in through defined methods, defined APIs. And for that reason, IBM I has never been able to have the kinds of viruses and Trojan horses on it that other platforms have. And so we were able to guarantee to an application vendor that they could count on this level of protection and invariability. And again, it was built into the operating system. Other people have tried to do similar things to this through security packages, but at the level of the kernel, at the level of the operating system, it was built there. Then, because every application needs other software to work besides the operating system, we began to integrate into the operating system the key things that every application was going to need. Now, at the beginning, that was, compilers and things like that, but it became things like web servers and application servers and that sort of thing that you have to put together. And again, I'll show that in a chart in a minute. Okay, and then from the very beginning, we knew that customers were going to be better off if you could have your primary ERP application, your enterprise resource planning application, your primary CRM application, customer resource management or customer relationship management, all running on the same system. You would be far better off if you could manage it in one place, and if they could use this one single operating system instance, this one single box, to do everything their business needed to do. And so we built an operating system that was based on the concept that we will have multiple workloads running on this platform. You need to be able to manage them, balance them, etc. They need to be able to use the same data without getting in the way of each other using that same data. And so we created an operating system that does that. Okay. Now, that may sound like, of course, everybody does that. But if you think about it, in the world today, people who are running Windows virtual machines are putting them on top of a virtualizer, right? A virtual machine construct, because the Windows operating system itself assumes that the application that's running in that Windows operating system is on its own. It's doing its own thing, and so you have to have essentially root access to be able to do that. Same sort of thing in a lot of Unix environments. And so you need, every time you want to put two workloads on the same machine, you have to have two virtual machines that don't interact with one another. In our architecture, we've always had the ability to have subsystems, and within subsystems jobs, having multiple workloads running on top of each other. And so we envisioned this platform from the very beginning to be a place where you could run multiple workloads, manage multiple workloads, and yet keep things balanced and secure. And then we created this thing called the Technology Independent Machine Interface, so that when you compiled a piece of code, you compiled it down to a set of virtual machine instructions so that we could, under the covers, change the hardware for you, but you didn't have to recompile your application. And that is still revolutionary in the industry. So these architectural elements do in fact make us different from our competition, and that will have business value. Now, when we first did this also, we had our own unique servers and storage, and I already showed you in the timeline that those servers and storage, that stuff underneath the technology independent machine interface, did change over time, but it didn't require disruption in most of the applications that were out there that were doing business work. Sure, if you manage the platform, you had to change to know different kinds of storage and so on, but the business applications didn't have to change for that. Now, that does provide, all of that does provide some business value that makes us unique. And one of the ways to show that is to imagine that you are a bank and you are going to buy a banking application. So this chart envisions an ABC banking application and what you would need to run that application if you are on IBM I versus on Windows. And so without going through every line here, the level of integration that we have shows that, okay, where you might have to get some sort of storage management application to help you manage storage for your banking application, IBM I will take care of that for you. If you are going to have virtualization, you're going to have VMware or something like that, right, underneath each of these so that you can have multiple applications running on the same physical hardware. We take care of that in IBM I with subsystems, or if you really want to, you can have multiple IBM Is, but most small banks in particular only have to have one image of IBM I, even if they are running workloads for multiple customers or multiple clients or multiple banks. So all of the stuff that you have to have underneath ABC banking is basically managed by IBM, provided by IBM in the IBM I space, where it has to be managed, acquired, put together, often by consultants in the non-IBM I case. We use Windows here because that's been our typical competition in the small and medium business space. So this is truly a value that you get from being on the architecture that we have today. Now, another thing that means is that you can have the same level of work be done by far fewer servers. We have seen many of our customers who we have won from Windows environments who had, on the order of 10, 20, 30 Windows servers, or at least Windows servers with that many different virtual machines on them that could be moved over and run, even if they were super large servers, on a couple of servers in Power, taking advantage of Power's ability to have multiple virtual machines with IBM I after you've moved those applications into IBM I, or the fact that IBM I itself can have multiple subsystems running in the same partition, the same virtual machine, and that ends up costing you then much less to manage. The complexity always means cost, okay? And these days, for folks who are conscious about how much energy they're using, right, our more modern Power families can use much less power than a farm of Windows servers or Unix servers. And so, again, that architecture that we have is not just about simplicity, and it's not just about making things nice for the applications. It actually makes things better for the value proposition within an IT infrastructure. Now, another part of what our integration brings to clients is that you can do more with fewer people. I think if any of you are in businesses where you have a mainframe or a bunch of Windows boxes, what you will find is that those other platforms require far more people to manage them. And that is in large part because of the automation we integrated into IBM I. The easiest example is the database and storage thing, but it's more than that. Again, I'll get into the database and storage stuff a little bit, but let me just talk about it here. Because DB2 and our storage management are constantly looking at how should we use storage and the indexes we built on top of our database to improve performance, you don't have to hire the kind of storage administrators and database administrators that are necessary on other platforms, because those people in those other platforms have the job of looking at performance metrics, moving data around, building indexes that then they have to apply. That's human resource that is not necessary on IBM I because we're doing that stuff for you. There are similar things in work management and so on. And so once you have accounted for how much the operating system does, and then the fact that you can do it on fewer systems, you do not need nearly as many people. And that's where doing a total cost of ownership study for IBM I is so important, to think about the number of people that you have to manage across the whole estate. This particular graphic was from a study that was done several years ago, but we find the same thing happening today. I didn't put the numbers here. This is in general, even if the hardware costs you around about the same, even if the licenses cost you around about the same, by the time you get to how many people it takes to manage the platform, architecturally, we help you have fewer people. Another thing that we excel in as a platform, and this is an architectural thing, is how little downtime you can expect to have from IBM I. And downtime is an expense. This, again, was from a study that was done by Cork-Lepton a while back. The numbers aren't important. What's important is we still find that customers who put some of their business on, say, a Linux Oracle platform or a Windows SQL platform, they will have far more downtime during the course of a 1 year, 2 year, 3 year period of time. Part of that is planned downtime that's absolutely necessary in those environments, because as they get updates, they have to take it. And we are far better at taking updates and not bringing you down. We've gotten better over the years. We used to be worse, and there are still ways we can go. But there's also the fact that we are a far more reliable platform. Between Power and IBM I, we do not go down unexpectedly nearly as often as those other platforms. And it's still mystifying to me that people think, well, it's just part of Windows, it's going to go down and you just have to bring it back up again. Okay, but if your business is critically reliant on that platform, Wouldn't you rather be on a platform where it's a real surprise if the system ever goes down? And that's what we are. It brings real business value to be as reliable as we are. Now, another thing, and this is just sort of a funny way to show this, the security that we built into the platform means that you don't have to have constant people paying attention to security, going to conferences where they learn about the latest security loopholes and fixes and so on. When IBM, most security people can take their jobs seriously, but take a little more time. Again, this is a funny way to look at it, but we do have security advisories related to IBM. I'm not saying we don't, but the amount of time you have to devote to that as compared to on other platforms, significantly less. And again, that is a business value that comes from our architecture. Now, the database that is included in IBM is not separate. It is part of the architecture, and therefore it is built to be secure. It is built to be scalable. We have customers who only have a little bit of data, and we have some of the largest data farms in the industry all running on DB2 We have to be that scalable, but we build DB2 to be autonomic. That is, learn from how the data is being used, adapt to it, and make that that performance get better. We've also built in analytics and AI, and I'll talk about that a little bit more when we get to the AI bit. And it's all easier to use and maintain because it is integrated so tightly with our storage management. Again, I'll get there in a little bit. Now, one of the key demonstrators of how well this architecture has provided the business value that we intended it to do is when we ask our customers who have multiple platforms, do you believe your IBM server gives you a better return on investment than other servers? And I want to thank Fortra for working with us every year to put out their survey and get this information, because we hear from so many of our customers just how passionate they are about the platform. But it's important that they also be able to communicate to their bosses, we get a better return on investment. That's why we continue to invest in this platform. Okay, and so if you need to explain to your business, why are you on this platform? These charts that I have been showing you, particularly with this one at the end or near the end, shows you that we are on a platform that other people also believe gives them tremendous value.